Greetings, this is a presentation by Stephen Glassner for EDU 675. This has to do with a FBA scenario that we are creating for class. I am basing my scenario on a real-life student with some minor changes made to the details in this real-life scenario that we actually did for one of my students. Significant improvements have been shown, but have not been completely eliminated. So, we have 7 steps for completing an FBA, and we shall go through each one of them. Step 1, we are to identify and define problem and replacement behaviors. So for this particular student, problem behavior means that the student it becomes aggressive towards others, students and staff, I should say, and this can include hitting, kicking, and throwing objects. And the replacement behavior we want to work on is to teach the student to request a break for when they feel like they may become aggressive. Step 2, collect data. It will be collect data. And so this was where we get to the interview I did for this week's assignment. It said a parent or a service provider, and so I interviewed this student's SLP. It should be noted that this is a completely different interview from the SLP interview from last week, and actually this is a completely different SLP altogether from the one that I interviewed for last week's assignment. And then in her interview, she described some behaviors of concern as some aggressive behaviors as starts with high-pitched laughing, which can lead into things such as disrobing, urination, slapping, throwing items, breaking items, and so forth. In her opinion, these behaviors occur in speech when new tasks are presented to the student, and she addresses the behaviors by doing things like giving options to help them ask, like, do you need help? Helping to visually draw out what the session might look like before working with the student, modeling the new task before having the student complete it, and enforcing and pairing behaviors with language. Some other things from the interview. I asked her what she thought possible reinforcers for behavior were. She included front-loading with expectations, having visual choices for reinforcement, listening to songs in the speaker room, or listening to music or dancing as reward for behaving appropriately. And some neutral reinforcers include familiar tabletop activities. Other feedback, she said, is for staff to notice antecedent behavior and then pair everything with language, requesting to go take a break, lay in a beanbag, express how they're feeling, and then just regularly having the student take breaks. I also completed an ABC chart, and I've listed a couple of likely scenarios that could be picked up during doing an ABC chart. So this could include the scenario of having a student doing a new reading activity, and then they start mumbling and laughing and saying things like, I'll hit and I'll kick. And the consequence there is to go and take a break for a few minutes and come back once they have calmed down and pick up where they left off with the assignment. A more serious example would be when there are more and more students coming outside for recess, and the student, who will often become overstimulated by large crowds, will take the basketball he's playing with and throw it at another student from just a few feet away. This consequence, as it usually plays out, is that the student will often drop to the ground and start to engage in other behaviors. The staff will have to help pick up the student and walk them into the building to de-escalate in a break room for a much longer period of time, making sure there are compliance checks, and understanding that there are different consequences, such as losing recess for the rest of the day, and not being able to earn preferred activities at the end of the day until they have continue to demonstrate non-aggressive behavior. And doing an FBA matrix, some things that I focused on included that the student will sometimes do these things, will after the fact look for attention. So meaning asking, wanting to recap what happened and asking, oh, who hit that student, and wanting us, the teacher, to acknowledge his aggressive behavior. Also likes to avoid new tasks such as the morning group activity. Student likes to obtain things like listening to music and dancing, and some sensory conditions is that the student becomes overly stimulated whenever new students arrive at recess. So we develop a hypothesis, and in this case we say that the student is engaging in more aggressive behavior towards others when it becomes overstimulated by certain triggers, and that when this happens, the student will need to take a break in an empty or nearly empty break room to de-escalate. Step 4, design and function-based intervention. We are going to do a skill-based intervention where we will work on the student building the skill of asking to take a break as a replacement behavior for the aggression. And then delving into the FBA, we define the behavior problem of becoming aggressive when they become overstimulated. The function is sensory conditions, and the skills we'll teach include things like providing instruction in how to ask for a break, as well as actually working on breaks, working on de-escalation techniques whenever we are modeling them and teaching them to the student whenever they are taking a break, as well as scheduling regular breaks during the day after long periods of time around others, even if we don't necessarily see the antecedent behaviors. Adjusting the antecedent, the student can lose preferred rewards whenever they do become aggressive towards another student, and we can modify consequences. This can include adding extra rewards for going through the school day without becoming aggressive, and requesting to take a break. And we can also decrease the scaffolding of required breaks as the student better learns to self-regulate and ask for breaks when they become overstimulated, and then hopefully the number of incidents of aggression go down. Step 5, we want to maximize intervention success, so look at things such as social validity, implementation fidelity, generalization and maintenance. In this particular case, this team believes that the FBA can be realistically be implemented in such a manner. Step 6, implement the intervention. So we want to make sure that they're implemented consistently. Understand that frequency may rise before falling again when first doing this, and that you want to take into account environmental factors. So for this student, it can be required extra large gatherings, such as assemblies. And then step 7, after a while, we want to evaluate the collected data and decide where to go from there, and then to decide, was the intervention successful, or does it need to be adjusted? And that is the end of my presentation.